Welcome to Royal Insights, where we explore the stories, traditions, and fascinating details behind royal families and dynasties from around the world. Join us as we uncover the history, culture, and curiosities that connect crowns across continents.
Imagine that your last name becomes so powerful that people are still using it 2,000 years after your death. Not as a historical reference, not as a tribute, not as the name of a salad or a casino in Las Vegas. As a title, a living, functional title used by rulers governing millions of people across different continents, different centuries, different religions, and different languages, all of them reaching back across 2 millennia to borrow the name of a single Roman who died on the floor of a Senate building in March of 44 BC. It sounds like something a novelist would invent and then think better of because no editor would believe it. And yet, that is exactly what happened to Julius Caesar. Today, when we hear his name, we think of a person, a famous general, a brilliant politician, a man who crossed the Rubicon, conquered Gaul, reformed the calendar, and was stabbed 23 times by men he considered allies. But somewhere in the centuries after his death, something extraordinary happened. His name stopped being a name. It became an idea. And that idea, the idea of Caesar, of supreme authority, of the man at the center of civilization who holds everything together, proved so durable, so transferable, so endlessly useful to ambitious rulers across the entire span of European history that it survived everything. The fall of Rome, the rise of Christianity, the migration of entire peoples, 1,000 years of medieval fragmentation, the Reformation, the Gunpowder Revolution, the age of nationalism, all of it. Caesar's name survived all of it. And tracing that survival is, in many ways, tracing the entire political history of Europe. Here is something worth clarifying at the start, because it changes how the rest of the story makes sense. Julius Caesar was never technically an emperor. He never held the title. The Roman Empire, as we think of it, with emperors ruling from palaces, commanding professional armies, presiding over a Mediterranean-wide bureaucracy, didn't exist yet during Caesar's lifetime. Rome in his day was still formally a republic. Power was supposed to be shared between elected magistrates, a powerful senate, and constitutional offices that had been refined over 5 centuries. What Caesar did was demonstrate that the whole system was a fiction, not by attacking it directly, by exploiting it so brilliantly that it collapsed under the weight of his success. His military campaigns in Gaul, modern France and Belgium, took about 9 years and resulted in perhaps 1 million people killed and another 1 million enslaved by ancient estimates. Whatever we think of those numbers today, contemporaries understood them as an astonishing military achievement. Caesar returned from Gaul the most celebrated general in the Roman world, commanding an army that was loyal to him personally rather than to the state. The Senate, recognizing the danger, ordered him to disband his army before returning to Rome. Caesar crossed the Rubicon instead. That river, the boundary between his military province and Italy proper, was a legal line that no Roman general was supposed to cross with armed troops. Crossing it was, by definition, an act of war against the Roman state. Caesar crossed it anyway, reportedly saying that the die was cast, and marched on Rome. What followed was a civil war Caesar won, and then another, and then another. Until by 44 BC, he had accumulated more personal power than any Roman in history. Dictator perpetuo. Dictator in perpetuity, a title with no precedent and no end date built in. His assassins, led by Brutus and Cassius, believed they were saving the Republic. They killed Caesar on the Ides of March and waited for the Republic to reassemble itself around his absence. It didn't, because the Republic, it turned out, had already been hollowed out. Caesar hadn't destroyed it. He had revealed that it was already gone, and his death didn't restore it. It simply created a vacuum that his successors would spend the next decade filling with blood. The man who emerged from that decade was Caesar's adopted son, Octavian. History knows him as Augustus, and Augustus understood something that the assassins missed entirely. Augustus was, arguably, the most politically gifted ruler in human history. He took the lesson of his father's assassination seriously. Caesar had made his power too visible, too concentrated, too obviously monarchical in a society that still had deep republican instincts. The senators who killed him had done so partly because he made them feel irrelevant. Augustus made everyone feel relevant while quietly accumulating more power than Caesar had ever held. He refused the title of king. He refused to be called dictator. He preserved the forms of the republic. The Senate met, elections were held, magistrates were appointed, while ensuring that all real power flowed through him. He called himself princeps, meaning first citizen, a modest title for an absolute ruler. But he kept the name Caesar. He had inherited it through adoption, and he understood its value immediately. Caesar meant victory. Caesar meant authority. Caesar meant the man who had remade Rome in his image. Augustus attached that name to his own, and every emperor who followed him did the same. For the first 2 centuries of the empire, Caesar was both a family name and an increasingly formal title. By the 2nd century AD, when emperors like Trajan and Hadrian presided over Rome at the height of its power and geographic extent, Caesar had fully completed its transformation. It was no longer a reference to Julius Caesar the man. It was the word for emperor, for supreme authority, for the person at the center of the known world. And it was in that form, as a title rather than a name, as a concept rather than a person, that Caesar survived the fall of Rome itself. In 476 AD, the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire, a teenager named Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer. Romulus was sent into comfortable exile in a castle in southern Italy. Nobody bothered to kill him. He wasn't important enough. That moment is conventionally marked as the fall of the Western Roman Empire. But here is what didn't fall: the idea of Rome. In fact, one of the great paradoxes of European history is that Rome became more powerful as an idea precisely as it declined as a reality. The physical empire contracted, fragmented, and disappeared. The roads crumbled, the aqueducts fell silent, the legions dissolved into successor kingdoms with names like Visigoth and Ostrogoth and Frankish. Latin survived only in the church and in the memories of scholars. And yet, every significant ruler in post-Roman Europe spent enormous energy trying to connect themselves to what Rome had been, because Rome had solved a problem that every ruler faces. How do you explain why you, specifically, should be in charge? Rome's answer had been the most compelling in history, not because Roman emperors were always good or wise or just. Many were catastrophically none of those things. But because Rome had worked visibly and undeniably for centuries. At its height, it had brought law, infrastructure, trade, and relative peace to territories stretching from Scotland to Mesopotamia. It had been the most successful political system the Western world had ever produced. If you could claim to be Rome's heir, you were claiming the most prestigious political legacy available. You were saying, I represent not just my family, not just my tribe, not just my kingdom. I represent the tradition of civilization itself. No ruler with ambition could resist that claim. The most dramatic assertion of Roman continuity came on Christmas Day, 800 AD. Charlemagne, king of the Franks, the most powerful ruler in Western Europe, was attending Mass at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Pope Leo III, who had his own political reasons for needing a powerful protector, placed a crown on Charlemagne's head and proclaimed him Emperor of the Romans. Charlemagne reportedly said he would not have entered the church had he known what the Pope intended. Whether that's true or not, the effect was revolutionary, because the coronation made a specific claim. The Roman imperial tradition had not ended in 476. It had merely gone dormant, and now, 3 centuries later, it was being revived. Not in Constantinople, not in some eastern successor state, but in the court of a Frankish king who had never set foot in Rome until relatively late in his life, who spoke Germanic languages as his mother tongue, and whose empire looked nothing like the Roman one. None of that mattered. The symbolism was everything. Charlemagne's coronation established a template that European rulers would follow for the next 1,000 years. If you wanted to claim supreme authority, authority that transcended mere kingship and elevated you to something above other rulers, you needed the imperial title. And the imperial title meant Rome, and Rome meant Caesar. The institution that eventually crystallized around this idea was the Holy Roman Empire, which endured in various forms from the 9th century until Napoleon dissolved it in 1806. Voltaire's famous observation that it was neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire was accurate as a description, but it missed the point. The Holy Roman Empire's value was never its reality. It was its claim. The claim to stand in the line of Caesar, Augustus, and Constantine. The claim to be, in some meaningful sense, the continuation of the greatest political tradition in Western history. As the Roman legacy spread across Europe, so did Caesar's name, transformed by the phonological rules of different languages into forms that sounded nothing alike but meant exactly the same thing. In the German-speaking world, the Latin Caesar became Kaiser. The pronunciation shifted over centuries as Latin passed through Germanic mouths, the hard C softening, the vowels rearranging, until the word that had once denoted a Roman family name now designated the supreme ruler of a German-speaking empire. When Otto I was crowned Holy Roman Emperor in 962, he was Caesar in substance, if not yet consistently in title. By the time the German Empire unified under Wilhelm I in 1871, Kaiser was the unambiguous choice. A deliberate invocation of imperial tradition at the founding moment of a new state that wanted to announce itself as heir to a millennium of European power. The eastern journey of Caesar's name is even more striking. In 1453, the Ottoman Turks under Sultan Mehmed II captured Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, which had styled itself as the direct continuation of Rome for nearly 1,100 years. The Byzantine emperors had called themselves Roman emperors without embarrassment or irony, because in their understanding, they were. Rome hadn't fallen, it had moved east. When Constantinople fell, the question of who inherited the Byzantine legacy became suddenly urgent. Russian rulers provided one answer. The theory of Moscow as the Third Rome emerged in the early 16th century. The logic was straightforward. If Rome had been the first center of Christian civilization, and Constantinople the second, and Constantinople had now fallen to the infidel, then the mantle of Christian civilization had passed to Moscow, the greatest surviving Orthodox Christian power, and the ruler of Moscow, accordingly, needed a title appropriate to that inheritance. The word that emerged was Tsar, a Slavic transformation of Caesar, following a different phonological path than Kaiser, but arriving at the same destination. Ivan the Terrible was the first Russian ruler to use the title formally and systematically, claiming in 1547 a continuity that stretched back through Byzantium to Rome itself. 3 linguistic branches, 3 political traditions, 3 different corners of Europe, all reaching back to the same Roman source. Caesar as Kaiser in the west, Caesar as Tsar in the east, and underneath both, the ghost of a Roman politician who had never asked to become a symbol of anything except his own ambition. What does it mean that a single Roman's name shaped European political language for 2,000 years? I think it tells us something important about how power actually works, not just in the ancient world, but in any world. Raw power, by itself, is unstable. An army can conquer a territory. It takes something more to govern it. Something that makes people accept authority not just because they fear the consequences of resistance, but because they believe the authority has a right to exist. That something is legitimacy. And legitimacy, in the end, is always a story. Rome told the most compelling story in Western political history. It said, "We represent civilization. We represent law, order, and the highest achievement of human organization. Our authority doesn't come merely from force. It comes from what we are and what we've built." When Rome fell, the story didn't die. It became available for borrowing. And every ambitious ruler who wanted to elevate their authority above mere kingship, above the level of a local strongman who happened to have more soldiers than his neighbors, reached for that story. They borrowed Caesar's name because they were borrowing Rome's claim. The claim to not just be powerful but legitimate, not just strong but right, not just a ruler, but the kind of ruler that history itself had been building toward. Most of them fell far short of that claim in practice. The Holy Roman emperors were often less impressive than their title suggested. The Kaisers of modern Germany used their Roman inheritance to dress up a Prussian military state in imperial robes. The Tsars of Russia built an autocracy that eventually collapsed under its own weight. But the persistence of the claim, across 20 centuries, across different languages, religions, and political systems, tells us something real about what humans want from power. We want it to mean something. We want it to be a part of a story larger than the individual who holds it. Julius Caesar, dying on the Senate floor, couldn't have imagined any of this. He was fighting for his life and losing. But the name he left behind became the most durable political inheritance in Western history. Not because of what he built, because of what others believe he represented. And in the long mathematics of historical influence, belief turned out to outlast everything else.